Welcome back. I am John P. Today we are going to be talking about watches that are a great value, and these are going to be watches that I believe, as a watch dealer, using my experience as well as being on the front lines, trading watches, studying the market, these are going to be watches that I believe will probably go up in desirability. As well with that will come the value of the watches. So all of these watches that I'm going to be sharing with you, I have observed climb in price and desirability, and I think that they will continue to do so. So if you are on the fence about any of these watches and you've been considering them, I would recommend adding them to your collection sooner than later. Of course, anything can happen in the world, as we've seen over the last 2 years, but all else being consistent, these watches will likely continue in desirability, and they're all great values, by the way. Today, tomorrow, they may not be great values. They may end up on a video that I make about watches that used to be great values or watches that are no longer great value, but today, they are all great values and you should consider them. Before I jump into that, on the wrist today, I have my vintage LeCoultre chronograph Valjoux 72 driven watch, and I have it on a very, let's see if we can get this here. Gorgeous, beautiful. You can see it on my Instagram, The Real John P, by the way, where you can see watches I wear, some watches from Delray Watch, delraywatch.com. But I have it on this very interesting strap here. Let me see if I can share it with you. It's a white strap, but it has kind of the rainbow stitching. I was inspired by the Breitling Super Ocean 57. There we go. With the rainbow dial, if you know, we've had a few of those at Delray Watch, so I was kind of inspired and I picked up the strap. I just thought it was kind of cool and unique. Okay, guys, what is going to be the first watch? This is going to be a watch that I have personally owned in the past. This is going to be a JLC, a Jaeger-LeCoultre, or a Jaeger-LeCoultre, depending how you pronounce it in the part of the world you're in. But this is going to be a triple calendar from the early 2000s, and this is going to be the 140.8.87 reference. There are similar references from the brand out there, but this is particularly the one that I owned, and I really loved and adored this watch. Myself, personally, I sold this watch because one of the wheels was in a different language, and for me, I like to wear my watches, and I just couldn't connect with the other language. Now, I get it, it's not a huge deal, and in retrospect, I would have liked to keep it considering the desirability and the demand, and the values have gone up on these early 2000s JLC watches, but nonetheless, there are some floating around out there, but few and fewer every single day that goes by. This is a watch that I think maybe 3 years ago, I paid $1,700 for, of course, wholesale dealer to dealer, but they were trading at maybe $3,000. Now on a bracelet, they can be had for $5,000, but the reality is, if you compare this watch to equivalents from Vacheron Constantin, which uses the JLC movements in this era of watches, they have direct comparison watches, arguably the very same quality, including the movements, the construction, the finishing, the case, so on and so forth. The watches from Vacheron are now selling at triple the price of these JLC equivalent watches. And as we see more people, collectors, trickle over from, Patek Philippe, maybe they can't get it or they don't want to pay the price, so then they move on to Vacheron. We've seen Vacheron prices and desirability go up in the last few years. And JLC is kind of going in that direction. We see it subtly, and we see it a little less than subtly in certain models, like the sector dials and some of the more contemporaries. But with these early 2000 models, these are going to climb. They're not making any more of them. Some people like the smaller, slimmer sizes, more compact sizes compared to their more contemporary, larger sizes from JLC. And once again, they have direct comparison to the Vacherons of the world. And so for those that are maybe not quite ingrained or noticing the JLC brand today, this will continue to rise as more people kind of follow down that path and get more into the brands that haven't quite been focused on by collectors or those that are new to collecting, just because of maybe not the amount that they are ingrained in watch collecting communities, right? When you think high-end watches, sometimes you're geared towards Rolex, Patek Philippe, some of the bigger names, but even though JLC is very common, a long-standing old world brand, they kind of had a period of time where they lost notability, but things are changing, and this is one that I recommend. If you're on the fence, get this before it's too late and they're trading at what are today Vacheron prices. Next, we have, this is going to be an entire brand, but particularly we can share some references from within this brand. This is going to be Parmesani Fleurier. Now, if you're not familiar with this particular brand, I get it. The name, sometimes people like to goof around a little bit. They say, oh, Parmigiani, chicken Parmesan, things like that. A little bit silly. I understand that. And I also think that maybe that has something to do with the reason that they're such great value pieces today. A little bit less of a great value than they were yesterday, but that means the brand has really been building itself, right? Parmesani Fleurier makes very fine, high-end watches in-house, entirely in-house. For the most part, of course, things have changed over time, but they make these in-house watches. How they do that is they're owned by the Sandoz Foundation, the same company that owns Novartis, right? The pharmaceutical behemoth, which is really where the Sandoz Foundation is making their money. And so they have this as kind of a subsidiary of the company, a bit of a passion project. But the brand is not new, right? They've been out since 1996, founded by Michel Parmesani, with the idea of making very high-end independent watches, sophisticated, and really holding the essence of classical watchmaking. They even have a department at Parmesani where they will restore the most complicated vintage watches and clocks and things like that truly no one else is willing to take on, because they have to fabricate and make the parts by hand using tools and lathes and so on. And this is something that many watchmakers don't want to do because it's a headache, and they're truly redesigning the product in some sense. But with Parmesani Fleurier, they are able to use movements that are coming from Vaucher or Vaucher, which now Hermes owns 25% of. So a lot of the movements you see in the Parmesani watches are slowly trickling into the higher end Hermes watches, which represent a great value in their own right. We'll talk about that in a different video likely, and I have in the past. With Parmesani Fleurier, these watches trading the pre-owned market can be had at a fraction of the price of retail, and that's really where the value is. They've kind of pushed the envelope when it comes to their retail prices being in line with the other competitors, and in the watch market today, we're seeing things skyrocket in terms of pricing, so I can't blame them for that. They've also changed up their marketing a little bit and tried to attack a younger segment with the PF Tonda, I believe, the PF Tonda, the integrated bracelet sports watch model that they have. They removed Parmesani from the dial, put PF, try to, kind of test out the waters and see if it's that Parmesani thing that's holding them back maybe from certain markets. But nonetheless, these represent great buys. You can find them out in the market. You can find them gray market. I think before the brand gets too strong and watch collectors really start focusing on it, pick up a Parmesani Fleurier today before they truly disappear from the market in the pre-owned at great values. Do this and you will likely not regret this. Next, we have a Girard Perregaux. Now, this is going to be a Laureato, but before I share with you my thoughts on the Laureato, I want to share with you a certain Laureato that was just announced, just released, and is in stores. This is going to be the collaboration between Aston Martin and Girard Perregaux. Very interesting collaboration. Two of my favorite brands of anything in the world in one watch. But I want to share with you this kind of there's no other word for it. It's hilarious. Listing on Chrono24. This is an $18,000 Girard Perregaux Laureato watch, a value watch by any stretch of the imagination. This person's selling it for $65,000 US dollars for an $18,000 watch. I'm sorry, this is not a Patek Philippe at the 7-Eleven. This is a very nice watch, a cool watch, limited edition, limited to 188 pieces, but $65,000 for a watch that without the Aston Martin collaboration would be trading at 35% under the retail price, making it truly a great value watch for so many reasons, which I'll talk about, is a little bit absurd, but I can't blame someone for trying, right? You get the watch, try it, throw it out there. Maybe someone who's an Aston Martin collector has to have it, but JLC did the Aston Martin collections and the collaborations with the Amvox line, and that's truly a watch that's difficult to sell, and I can assure you that it's just a difficult sell collaboration. You saw it with the Breitling Bentleys, you see it with the Aston Martins. They're not popular collaborations. Who knows? maybe I will be wrong and this watch will sell for $65,000. I wouldn't be entirely surprised with the way that the watch market is going, being a dealer and a trader. But let me know what your thoughts about this listing in the comments below. And if this is your listing, I'm sorry. It's just, it's a little advantageous if you have to ask me. But the Girard Perregaux Laureato in general is a great buy because it's held to the same, if not better, finishing standards as their, I want to say alternatives, but really competitors at this point, right? You have the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak, you have the Patek Philippe, and Girard Perregaux, while they have a couple of shortcomings compared to those, it's not a lot, and it's at a huge price difference, right? Laureatos can sometimes be had for the non-chronograph version, 42 millimeters, for $7,000. I believe the retail is just 12 or north of 12. They may have raised the retail prices recently to keep up with the market, but this represents a great buy. We're talking about a brand that's hundreds of years old world brand, truly ingrained in the watch collecting community and delivers on so many fronts. The movements are workhorse, rock solid, and they're so finely finished. Everything from the case to the movements, the construction of the dial. I had a Laureato for quite a long time until someone made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and I mostly focus on vintage at this point. But even the vintage Laureatos have disappeared from the market. So if you have been considering a Laureato or perhaps looking at a Laureato as an alternative to something like an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak, now would be the time to get this because they are drying up on the market and they are worth today every bit of the quality that they deliver. One of my favorite watches, I will have to say. Next, we have an Omega Seamaster Diver 300M wave dial with the ceramic bezel. I talk about this watch all the time. We've had so many of them in the doors at Del Rey Watch. I don't think we have any today because they do fly off the shelves. And this isn't something that, sometimes we're, the fingers pointed at myself and Federico, oh, you guys are making the market for Omega Seamaster. You guys talk about this so much. It's because you're a watch dealer. We're not an authorized dealer. We get them in pre-owned, a couple of them a month at that. So, we're really not market makers for Omega as a brand and all the watches that they produce, millions of watches a year or something like that. So a couple watches here or there is not going to make or break Omega as a market. This is just an overall rock solid, great, well done watch. Spec for spec beats the Rolex Submariner present day in almost every single way. I've done a video comparing the two on my channel. I'll try to put the link in the description below. But the reality is this is a watch that trades at a fraction of the price of the Submariner and delivers every bit of value aside from the branding. But Omega branding is catching up. Go on the forums, go in the comments below. There will be so many people in the comments below on my Instagram, The Real John P, as well, talking about how much they love this watch. There are people that own the Submariners, that own the Patek Philippe's, and they wear a watch like this, right? Look at, guys like Joe Rogan. This is a watch that he wears, and there's no way, there's always the one person in the comments, well, they're probably sponsored by Omega. They don't need to be, right? And if you can choose any watch and you choose this watch, it says something about the watch. Now, today, they can be had at a great deal. They're a great value. Omega's pushing up their retail prices. The discounts are drying up. They are in stores in select markets. You can buy them. And if you can get a discount, take one and run, because this watch that retails at $5,200 on a bracelet, depending on the version, we're talking the standard fit ceramic bezel. Let's talk any of the dial du jours out there, not the neck ton or any of the special editions, James Bond, you get it higher price. But these can still be had at, maybe $4,000 pre-owned, $3,750 US pre-owned. That's an unbelievable price, right? Because the Rolex Submariner would be $10,000, $11,000. This is a fraction of that. You could buy three, one for yourself, two for your friends, one in every color, your choice. I don't really care, just so long as you consider it and you take my advice, because these truly are starting to dry up at the great value price point. If you don't mind paying retail, probably always going to be able to get one, at least in the near future, but the deals on these are drying up. We don't have them at delreywatch.com right now. Difficult for us to get at a discount, but walk into a store, try to get one now if you can. Please take my advice. And lastly, this is another one that's a very similar story to the Omega Seamaster. This is going to be the Zenith El Primero. Within recent times, this was a bit of a, I don't want to say it was a controversy, but there was a lot of dispute. There were a lot of debates online, on YouTube, on Instagram, all the channels, all the places, people were debating the Zenith Chronomaster Sport and whether or not it was a Rolex Daytona knockoff. I get it, set that aside. Regardless of that, the fact is this has become a desirable watch. Now they've come down a little bit in price point. You still might have to hunt around for one. On the strap, they're a little bit easier to find than the white dial on the bracelet. That seems to be a trend from all the brands. White dial on bracelet watches seem to be a thing right now. They seem to be hot. So you do have to hunt around, but what it says more about the brand, and particularly the El Primero line or the movement or really the class of watches from the brand, is that not only are they here to stay, it's getting the respect that it probably should have had decades ago before Zenith had a bit of a tough time and went through a couple of different hands and rebranding phase. Now, Zenith El Primero watches, sometimes you could get them for $1,500 on the pre-owned market. Now we're seeing pretty much across the board Zenith El Primero driven watches, as long as it's not in some kind of one of these obscure cases that they came out with in the 90s or early 2000s. As long as it's an El Primero classic chronograph watch, these have gone up in price, and they continue to do so as more people recognize the value in the history behind the movement and the watch brand. Zenith is selling more watches than they ever have. They have more partnerships, and they've done so many great things and released so many interesting designs that watch collectors have loved. And it's been an entire 180 about face for the brand, and we are going to continue to see this happen into the future. And with this, we're also going to see the El Primero watch models from the past and the present today start to dry up. And when that happens, you also start to lose the ability to get a great discount. So yes, quality watch, quality movement, has the history, has the heritage, has everything you would want from a chronograph and a watch in general. People recognize this, collectors recognize this, the brand recognizes this. This is going to be a watch that in the future will start trading a lot closer to the retail price than they ever have before, which makes it a great value today. But what do you guys think? Are there any other watches that you believe are a great value? I would love to see it and hear it in the comments below. Please do not forget to check out my Instagram, TheRealJohnP, and check out DelReyWatch.com, where we may have some of these watches, but things change every day, so you really don't know what you're going to find. So make sure to check it out for yourself, Del Rey Watch. Thanks, guys. You've been chatting with John P. Ciao.